I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk. Gotta keep quiet, maneuver and silence the...
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Startup on the Blocks. We're excited to have a great guest tonight, Blanca Catalani Garcia. Hello. You got to get your mic on there and we'll be good to go. All righty. Fantastic.
Hi there.
So, hi. And Blanca. And I'll go ahead and, tell the audience a little bit about Startup on the Blocks, and then I'll get you to introduce yourself. Welcome, everyone. We're excited about our event tonight, and Startup on the Blocks is all about helping founders get connected to resources and help them learn the best practices. So this event that we have every Thursday from 6 to 8 Central Time, it's all about allowing founders to an opportunity to network one-on-one and meet other founders. And then our session here at 7, it's all about learning about the startup ecosystem and the best practices for taking your idea all the way to an MVP and getting connected to the resources and stuff like that. So we've connected with Blanca, and so I will let her go ahead and introduce herself so we can learn a little bit more about her. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Such a pleasure to be here. Such a pleasure to be part of Startups on the Block. On the Blocks, I am grateful and excited and honored to share my story. My name is Blanca Catalina Garcia. I am based here in Atlanta, Georgia. But funny story. I'm originally from Santiago, Chile. That's where I was born. Actually lived some time in the country before we moved to Florida when I was a teenager. So I actually have lived most of my American life in Florida. So
Wow,
I'm,
okay. I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. So guess what? I am a Florida girl at heart, and so just really happy to connect with you all. I have been working here in the Atlanta, really in the weeds. Heads down in the Atlanta ecosystem with emerging founders of all kinds of entrepreneurial ventures, but really mostly focused on tech startup and tech enabled businesses, and doing that mainly with BIPOC women founders. So lots of Black and Latina women founders,
That's
but
great.
also
Yeah.
founders from all different backgrounds, lots of diverse founders. So that's been this intersections. That's been the space that I've been in for the last 4 years, and just happy to share with you my experiences.
Yes, that's just what we need here today. You're somebody with your background. That word BIPOC you mentioned, you probably need to tell the audience a little bit about what that means.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we hear all kinds of different words that talk about our communities. Minority communities, underrepresented communities, and BIPOC is one of the new words that's come around. And I think it's really something of a recognition of the fact that we are trying to refer to a group of diverse people that have often been many of these spaces. So BIPOC is Black, Indigenous people of color.
Mhm.
So
Oh
that's
wow,
what that's.
okay. Yes, that's great. Yes, and so for those of you in the audience, when we have the ecosystem here in Northwest Florida, and what we would like to do is make sure that ecosystem is inclusive. So somebody like Blanca, she has the experience for folks who are running programs in ecosystems to kind of help them understand how to get connected and relate to people of color. Is that right, Blanca?
Yes, absolutely. That's so speaking to my ecosystem builder family, or as I like to call us, ecosystem engineers, because a lot of
Okay.
times we're not just connecting people, we're building stuff to make that happen.
Yes.
But yes, absolutely. So, and I know this is a challenge for so many ecosystem builders out there. If you're running an incubator, an accelerator, an entrepreneurial education program, or you're trying to engage more diverse communities, and it's just going to look different. And I think one of the things that you have to keep in mind, and that what I'm hoping that we can kind of dive into tonight, is that there we're talking about startup, we're talking about building scalable businesses, but a lot of that conversation and the culture that's around that, as well as the resources and the infrastructure that's around that, has a foundation in a very specific community that was able to access it. And so a lot of times we and the pathway that we have to take to reach certain things are not represented in that tradition, in that infrastructure. So sometimes this is why I mean ecosystem builder, ecosystem engineer. Sometimes you have to build something new. You have to add something on. You have to listen and see where there might be a gap or a bridge to be made
Hmm.
in order to reach more diverse communities.
Yes, I would agree with that. And so, like here in Northwest Florida, and we'll start talking about the founders a little bit, but we kind of want to make sure that all across Northwest Florida here, Panama City and back over here to Pensacola, that there are opportunities, for Black and Brown founders. There are opportunities for all founders, and we need to have an ecosystem that's inclusive and that allow our founders to connect with each other and help each other grow. And so So and so we just all need to understand that this ecosystem, we need to understand how to make it grow, and part of that is knowing how to connect with people of color, you know, because their needs are somewhat different.
Right. I mean, something that I always try to remember is that our communities, like, it's not a monolith, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so something that I would offer to ecosystem builders, something that I have thought about a lot myself, is the fact that who am I trying to reach exactly,
Yes.
right? So if I want to engage Latinx tech startup founders,
Mm-hmm.
who am
Mm-hmm.
I trying to reach exactly, right? So if you think about who's the most likely early adopter, and I'm like sharing with you sort of like where I am in my shop.
Yes.
I'm looking at students that Latinx students are typically really engaged in engineering careers,
Yes.
development careers. That's increasing, and even more so, they're increasing presence in the technology professional space. But typically, they're not going into technology startups. They're going into sort of the traditional academic or corporate path.
Yes.
And so I know that if I reach out to that particular group
Yes.
of Latinos, they might have the tools, the readiness to
Mm-hmm.
jump into building a tech startup. Now,
Okay.
that's very different from, say, a community of, and I've worked with many different types of communities of Latinos, a community of new Americans who
Mm-hmm.
are learning English, who are learning what it means to be in this culture. How do they navigate that? Where does that sit for them? And so that level of readiness is going to be a little bit further away
Mm-hmm.
because they have all these other things that they're solving and integrating.
Okay, I got you. I think I follow what you're saying, and so you're saying that the ecosystem has to be sensitive to that and be aware of that as well.
One of the things that is really important is to just really understand who it is trying to reach, aside from, say, I want it to be diverse here. I want to, okay, so what does that diversity look like? And where are you meeting your community?
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes we take things for granted. We're in the ocean, but we don't call it the ocean because, we're fish and we don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with some programs, they're well positioned to address maybe sort of who's generally there, who's the larger or dominant population of people.
Yes.
And that just doesn't just involve a race or culture. It can involve socioeconomic status, access to education, shared culture. It looks different in, say, a suburb where maybe everybody kind of has a lot of the shared culture, goes to the same block parties,
Mm-hmm.
is in each other's lives in a communal way, versus, say, in the middle of a city where you have lots of different people moving in and out, and not everyone is speaking the same code, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, like, speaking the same code, but then also, I think we are all brainwashed on the traditional way you build a business, which this startup, thing you're trying to do scalable businesses, and so it's just a challenge. People just not aware of it. So we, in our messaging, we just kind of have to, I think, keep putting successful founders of color out in front of them, and so they can see that is actually possible. And I guess you had some experience, with different types of programs. What are some of the type of programs that you've participated in, and some you may have created in the past?
Thanks so much. Yes, and I've had so many great opportunities to see what it looks like for different ages. So, for example, an entry point here in Atlanta into the tech startup ecosystem was I was part of the big incubator, big, for thinking big,
Oh,
which we can talk
okay.
about later, because that's a great topic to talk about, by the way.
Okay.
Um, But it was an incubator run by Digital Undivided, and that incubator was focused on what we call ideation stage. So people who have ideas, or maybe they have something very basic that they've tried out, like maybe they built a website or something, but they have an idea for a tech startup. And that particular program was focused on Black and Latina women-led companies.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was and it was an incubator program that did have like a start and an end. So we had an application process. So it was really cool because not only did I get to work with the specific cohorts that were in the actual program and sort of dive deep with them, but we also had the application process, which involved a big event, and we had lots of women come in and share their ideas and pitch and work on the business model canvas.
Okay.
So that was really cool. Now I want to. So I'm going back to what we were talking about before and building context. You have to remember that most of the women who were coming in at least had a sense of what a startup was. Like they'd heard about it, and they also knew kind of what a tech company would be. What does it mean to build a tech company? So honestly, a lot of the women that I was working with were people who were already, professionals, or they were in the corporate space and were thinking about transitioning into entrepreneurship. Or women who had done a lot of like active work. They're active in their community. They've done creative things, and so this is something that they reached out for. Nevertheless, in that ideation process, and even for myself, this was a transformational experience. A lot of the work that we did together was about mindset, like really just starting to shift. How do we think about like, what does it mean to build a company? And I remember having conversations somewhere halfway through the program when we would talk about like, we're the only ones that we can talk to about this.
Okay.
Nobody in our family really gets it. There's some people in our professional circles who kind of get it, but like overall, it just feels really, really foreign. So there wasn't a lot of network knowledge. So I actually transitioned into helping Joey Womack, who's a local ecosystem leader here in Atlanta. He had been running Goody Nation, which is a nonprofit organization.
That's how we met, right? That's how we met.
Yeah, that's how we met. And he had the opportunity to build out what at the time was the Intentionally Good Project, which is now the Intentionally Good Program, which is our national program, our education program for founders. And in that program, there's a lot of founders that are already in the process of, they've launched their businesses. So they have a product, or they have a platform, and they're in the process of growing. So they're dealing with things like customer acquisition, pivotal growth, and building profit or getting capital.
Okay.
So that looks very different. This is working with founders who really are savvy and slick when it comes to the entrepreneurship code. They're dealing with some of the institutional barriers that diverse founders often deal with. So things like trying to really find funding without having a network of people who have, ready, set checks, or who know them and who are investors. And just generally dealing with, the bandwidth that it takes to really scale a company at that size. And that's something that I will say for any founders who are online who are sitting here thinking, what is it that I want to really do? I think I want to do a startup. Don't close yourself off. I've worked with plenty of companies who started on the startup path and they built a company that they loved. And they're like, you know what? This is a tech-enabled business that I want to stick with. I'm going to be here for the next 5 years because I love my customers. I love my business.
Yes.
I don't want to be the next unicorn. Okay. I want to make impact for my community. So seeing founders like figure that out and really like build their chops, but also and be empowered in their path. And then I've had lots of opportunities. Like one of the programs that I'd like to mention is Walker's Legacy. Okay. And so Walker's Legacy last year launched a accelerator program, and Walker's Legacy is focused on the legacy of Madam C.J. Walker. So it's all about
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool. Really cool organization. Definitely check it out. And so they are focused on women of color entrepreneurs. And so I've had the opportunity to now lead two, and I'm going to be leading my third Prospectus Accelerator program. It's a virtual 10-week program. And this last one we did was focused on Latinas. So
wow, fantastic.
that was really cool. And in that program, we have everything from tech startups to Main Street entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Anywhere from ideation stage to somewhere in the space of growth. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. And the whole idea was to sort of come in and talk about how do we build our business, but also how do we build community? How do we champion for each other and find the champions that we need? And it's really about this, going back to what we mentioned before. What does the pathway look like for women of color in entrepreneurship in all of these different avenues? Because it's not going to be the laid out path of the institution of the system, because that just doesn't work for most of them.
There's a question from Natalie saying, what is the name of the program modeled after Madam C.J. Walker?
Yes, I will make sure to share a link. So Walker's Legacy. And please look me up on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you. And I have lots of those links on my sites. I'll share the Walker's Legacy website. Mm-hmm. And I'll be sure to share my LinkedIn a couple of times so you guys can connect with me.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, that sounds great. And we'll make sure everybody gets that. I'll put the link in the email we sent out for the follow-up for this event as well. So what was interesting about what you said, you had a combination of, these high growth type startups and these Main Street type small businesses. So I've never heard of a program that tried to accommodate both type founders at once.
Yeah.
So what's that
like? What's interesting is that, and I'm not going to own this. This is something that a wonderful mentor that I met, she's a technology mentor and somebody that I greatly admire, Axie. She said, she was like, you know what? A business is a business is a business.
Yes.
We've been doing business since before Jesus in the marketplace. To some extent, it's a bit into sort of like human society, right? We have this exchange, negotiate that. And so I think the Prospectus program is meant to look at sort of like the key pieces of any business, things like legal structure or marketing, right? Which does look really different in all of those different types of businesses. But at its core, marketing is about what? Really good storytelling, a brand, understand how to communicate with them, things like that. But the other thing that I think is really significant about your question, and something that I do want people to sort of think about, especially as diverse founders, is that community is key. So if you think about what it's like to be in the world where so many things are built for you, community is great, but you might not need it in the same way where if you're walking into situations or you're walking into a venture that maybe was not built, it didn't have you in mind. It didn't think about your culture, the way that you connect with your family, the kind of mental load that you carry, then having that community is this really key piece. So it was really just about connecting as Latina entrepreneurs and championing for each other and finding this sort of feeling that we are not alone in this. And that's really what that was about.
Yeah, so that's I'm glad you explained that, because here locally they have something called the business roundtable for minority on small businesses and so with Startup on the Blocks, I think I would love to we tend to focus on the high growth startups, and that's what we try to do. But I noticed today talking to a young lady that that's trying to do a Main Street business, that a lot of the advice you would give the person is very similar or the same, whether it's a Main Street or a high growth one. And so that's pretty neat, and it's definitely but my point always is like if you want to do a Main Street business, fine, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And so we actually connect with the Main Street businesses to kind of introduce them to the startup ecosystem as well, because they may be aware of a problem that can turn that into a like a startup or product or service, and then they can take advantage of all the pitch competitions, accelerator programs that require you to be a high growth company. And so I think the other point I would make about that too is that people out there working on these corporate jobs, they become aware of problems, and they need to be aware of the startup ecosystem as well. And just like you mentioned earlier, and then we make them aware of it, and then when they're ready to become a founder, or they can leverage the ecosystem, but everybody needs to learn about it first.
I totally agree, and that's a great segue into actually what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Which is my main gig right now is I'm now working at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
But in sort of the Georgia Tech sort of ecosystem, there is an organization that's actually it's not funded by Georgia Tech or anything. There's sort of brothers, but
yes,
but they are actually funded by the state as an economic development program, which is the Advanced Technology Development Center. And the Advanced Technology Development Center, or ATDC, is, I believe, the oldest technology incubator here in Georgia, here in Atlanta. And so it's this tremendous organization with so many resources. And then inside of Georgia Tech is these local centers for the MBDA. If you're not familiar with the MBDA, it's the Minority Business Development Agency, which is much more, it's focused on minorities, but it's much more focused on the businesses you just described, those Main Street businesses, those traditional growth into enterprise businesses that sort of what some of the traditional business organizations address. And so my role is now as an MBDA at ATDC Catalyst.
Wow.
And it's really cool.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. If I remember right, the MBDA, I used to live in Atlanta for a short time, and they actually do stuff for you, but you pay a small fee or something. Yeah, so they actually can do work for your business. That's the way it used to be 20 years ago, but I don't know if it's like that now.
Right. So they have the business center and the manufacturing center. So yeah, exactly. And they have a lot of services and things that are subsidized by the government, and they're meant to be incentives for businesses. But what is so interesting about what you say is that a lot of my job is exactly that, is to say, hey, two worlds, you're not that different. You can learn from each other. So what's really cool about the tech startup space, it is a space of imagination. This is where inventors go and create the craziest stuff, things you wouldn't believe the kind of things that I get to hear, the ideas I get to hear of, and I'm sure you hear those kind of things all the time, Lloyd, as well. This is a space for imagination. And it's also looking at, like, when we talk about high growth, we're looking at business problems that affect a lot of people, right? So it's like big markets. So they've got this sort of like fast, go, make it, imagination, anything, so the sky's the limit kind of, this is the part of this culture. But then you have the Main Street business space, which, really has like a pathway down pat. They understand the structure of business. They know they're like, wait a minute, how are you going to make money? Like, really, how are you going to connect to your customers? How are you contributing to your community? How are you making jobs? And so these two really have a lot to say to each other, and there hasn't been a space to make that connection. So it's really exciting to be in that, and sort of like that in between.
Yeah. So also, what's interesting about that too is I noticed that PayPal, when they set aside money for the Black and Brown founders, they did a little over 500 million. But I think they also had programs for Main Street businesses and traditional businesses
That's
as
right.
well. Yeah. Whereas a lot of the money that's out there is being targeted directly for the high growth type startups, and but
That's right.
yes, and so the you you mentioned Goody Nation in your work there, and so I guess the way we met was I, our KuKua Institute, who runs the Startup on the Blocks program, we got accepted in the Goody Nation STEM tech training thing, and doing the weekly stand ups and getting the connection to opportunities, and it's like the last couple I've been in, I've got some good ideas, and I've implemented them immediately. And so we're with the on the other side with the startups. You, you're saying that you all actually the startups are a lot further along in building stuff or already have stuff and trying to acquire more customers and stuff like that. But yeah, is that tell us a little bit about the process of a startup getting into that program?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what's interesting is that they're doing the same thing y'all are.
Hmm.
There's a template process that it looks a little different in each,
Yeah, yeah.
but they have the same needs. So yeah. So what we found is that with Goody Nation specifically, and really when we talk about highly scalable businesses, once I talked about those institutional blocks, we understand that social capital is key.
Okay.
You can get so far with your wits and your chops and maybe some capital. But when it comes down to it, knowing people, knowing mentors, knowing people who will write checks for innovative companies, and knowing people who will influence others, influence the market, have inroads into say maybe you are building a company that is a perfect fit for a corporate pilot, but you don't know anybody in the corporate space. So social capital is so key. So that's a lot of what we focus on there is prepping, really thinking about strategic relationships and what does it mean to have social capital, that the social capital you need
Yeah.
as a high growth company, and building those introductions. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what my strategy was for the nonprofit to get connected there to what's going on in Atlanta, but also for our portfolio companies and the startups that are listening. We wanted to make sure they're aware of that program and be on the lookout for opportunities. And I noticed on people that connect with you on LinkedIn, you post a lot of the stuff, opportunities, and you posted one today that like first prize was like $100,000 and second prize was 100,000 and third prize was 75,000. It's just all kinds of stuff that's actually out there, and it's just so many things and opportunities. And so were you planning on you said something about, did you already say everything you wanted to say on that big idea? um,
Oh yeah, the big idea. Okay. So somebody asked me, I was visiting a class of students
okay.
that were learning about entrepreneurship and innovation, and they had built sort of like a mock startup, and they asked me what what I thought was the biggest challenge for founders, and I told them it was about, well, there's lots of challenges.
Hmm.
Everybody's got their list.
Hmm.
But for me, it's really about mindset.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Hmm.
so certainly there are real external barriers and you can think, serenity now through all of it, that it's not going to change what's in front of you, but so much about especially building an innovative business and a scalable business like that is
Hmm.
about um, allowing yourself to think big.
Yes.
And this was something that I was confronted with when I was at Digital Undivided. I had been doing community initiatives, education initiatives. I'd worked in multicultural communities. I'd done lots of things that I thought were really cool. Nothing like being in the entrepreneurship space. This is my cup of tea for sure. But one of the things that I did notice is that I was talking to these people who would just jump on these big ideas without really thinking about it. They were like, well, why don't we just do this? And we could just do that. And I was like, how do you even think that way? You know, I literally would ask, how do you even think that way?
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a muscle, because it's a combination of engaging your creativity or your imagination, which most of us, Lloyd and I were talking about, most of us have kind of forgotten how to really do that.
Mm-hmm.
And also engaging your imagination and your creativity takes bandwidth. And some of us are dealing with a lot of mental load, a lot of responsibilities, multiple jobs, kids, social responsibilities, financial problems. All of those things kind of get in the way of using your imagination. But the other thing that was key, and I will tell you, there's studies about this. The number one factor that makes a founder successful is self-trust, inner locus of control.
I've never heard that before.
Yes, I will send you the studies.
Okay, fantastic.
It blew my mind, because I thought I had started to kind of figure this out, right? That it was like not so much about the idea, but rather these sort of people who came in and who weren't really measuring possibilities from what they saw outside of them or from what people were telling them, but rather what they believed to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they trusted that more. And
Mm-hmm.
so much of entrepreneurship, whether you're building a bake shop or you're building like a widget that's going to make, baking all over the world on Amazon, whatever you're building, it's really about trusting yourself. And so you're engaging your imagination, you're imagining what's possible and beyond, and you're trusting that first of all, that's like a thing that could happen in the world, but
Mm-hmm.
also that you are the one to execute upon it. And this is something, sometimes I work with really, really smart people, like really cool, smart people who've done really cool things in their life. And they're telling me about, like, but why just this? That idea could be this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, let me think about that. It's like, sort of integrating this idea that you can be that expansive. And there's a lot of other things there's layers to that.
Yes.
I want to remind founders, Latinx founders, Black founders, women founders, those of us who are part of communities that are underrepresented, that there's also a lot of external barriers to that. We live in a society and in a world that often us to stay in our place and also tells us that is safe. And so it can feel really risky and it can feel really irresponsible to think big, which is why it's really accessible for, say, like a 20-year-old engineering student who doesn't have to have a job to pay off their school. Like, to them, it's like, sure, sky's the limit. So, just remember that there's all these other things outside of you that you kind of have to battle against. And this was one of the number one things I saw, especially with my women of color founders, as they're progressing in their businesses and they're, getting to that point where they really do have to trust themselves. And also they're making space in their life for this business. A lot of times their families are the first one to push back on them. Like,
Yes.
hey, wait a minute. I'm sure you see this.
Mm-hmm.
So and that tells you that in order for you to think big, in order for you to engage that imagination and practice that self-trust, you really do have to make space, and like make space the way Ayanna Presley talks about making space, like being willing to speak up when you feel like, am I supposed to speak up? And just kind of like letting yourself and practicing that little by little, which is why it's so important to have communities of fellow founders. And why representation is so important, something that you mentioned earlier. Representation is key, which is system builders and engineers, if you can get 1 or 2 or 3 diverse founders, you are building the path for 10 more, because now people are seeing that someone that looks like them in a space that they never imagined themselves in.
Yeah, I remember early on in in my startup journey, I had participated in an accelerator program over in Fort Walton, and I actually didn't totally, uh, you know, so I had to learn about what an accelerator program was, and so, but it was for veterans, and the and when I looked at the application, and then I was recommended to apply for the program. And then they sent me this email about planning out my milestones, and said, so working for the government, I know what milestones were, but now for a startup, it was a little interesting. The funny story was, so since this was for veterans, so what I did was I knew what I needed to do for my, I just used the stuff I learned working in the research lab, had to investigate things and do experiments, and then decide after you do the experiment. And so what I did was I did all my milestones, based on this approach. And so the other veterans in the thing, so it was, we got 25 grand, but you got 25 grand, that was piddled out based on those milestones. So each milestone, you got a certain amount of money. And so I made sure my milestones was something I could accomplish.
Right.
Whereas the other people in the program, they put stuff with not even knowing what they were ability to accomplish them were, and so they had trouble getting paid.
Yeah.
But when you talk about that mindset thing, it's really important. So when we started Startup on the Blocks, what I did was Sam Altman, had like an audio thing about that startup mindset for a founder, and I had that posted at the top of our Facebook page, because I wanted the founders to actually listen to that and to understand, what are you getting into. What's the mindset? It was all about telling you what mindset you have to have, and he explained it, pretty well. And so, and because you're right, because you do have to have a mindset. And one of the other things I remember, working, being in this cohort with these veterans, some of them, in DOD, working for the military, you're trained to avoid risk, minimize all risk, and then here you in an accelerator program where they're telling you to fail fast.
Exactly.
And so it took some of those people almost half of the thing, of not more than 12 weeks, to actually get them to start even thinking big, like you're suggesting. But it's pretty neat. But the funny story is, one of the guys that was having the most trouble, he actually kept pivoting, and he has a successful startup, and he's also investing in startups. So it's a pretty neat story. But so the Venture Hive Accelerator from Miami, I don't know if you were down there when they were doing that, but that was the hardest thing they were trying to do, is getting the founders to kind of think big.
Exactly. Because you're right, it's risky. And also, I think all of us are taught to think exactly the way that you just described, to mitigate risk. And to kind of this idea of the milestones, like I get paid per milestone. I mean, if you think about so many of the things that we do in life, that's kind of how it works. It's like you have a certain objective and you stick with what you know you can accomplish, because there's a certain reward at the end of it. And really, in the startup space, I mean, let's face it, startups are most likely to fail. Mm-hmm. But I think what is key, and I want to emphasize something. I am not by any way disavowing the the hard loss that it can be when you fail your company. It's a loss of money, a loss of time, and for many people it can be devastating. So this is not, I'm not in any way trying to minimize that. However, I have worked with so many people who have gone into the startup space. Most of them, somehow their business didn't work, but all of them are transformed. It is a transformational process, and like you said, it's like after 12 weeks, all of a sudden they're not so afraid anymore, and they're starting to think about what could be possible, and they're willing to go beyond that and try something new. And for me, that's the most exciting part of this, is the process of seeing people engage their creativity and their imagination, and also their that oomph for life, but also seeing them trust themselves. There's some here I'm going to get cheesy. I truly believe each person is so unique and has so much, which is why it is so important for us to diversify the communities of founders that are entering the startup space. Often startups are just an idea for the future,
Yes.
right? So those ideas for the future and the future that they will build cannot belong to just one group of people. It has to be all of ours. Like the idea of diversifying and the access to the startup world is about sharing the future. And each person brings this woman over here, and this guy over here who has a disability or whatever. They might both be building a fintech company to help their communities pay off debt. But those businesses are distinctly different because those founders and that community who's building it and how they're thinking of how to uniquely enter the market and what their take on innovation is informed by who they are and their life experience, and that is totally unique. No one can replicate that. And those ideas need to exist. So yeah.
And so I think most of the successful founders, they have these experiences and they get these ideas, and if they follow these best practices of building a startup, I think that's really what key. And what I noticed here in Pensacola was that the methodologies hadn't really been embraced, but we have a bunch of law firms here that's got a lot of money, and so they were funding some of these startups, but they weren't following the best practices. And I had an experience after I retired from the government. Was I thought I knew what I was doing, and I was spending money, and end up losing about almost $200,000. And so, but then when I started understanding the startup ecosystem and how you how you work with the customer from day one, and build something that somebody needs or want, and they're willing to pay to you to build it for them, and so that's what I that was a shock to me. That literally that people will pay you to solve a problem for them. If it relates to your idea, to move forward. Yes.
Yeah. I think something from sort of the adaptive leadership work that is a totem for me is the idea that you cannot. Technology is not built to solve a behavioral problem. And so the bigger picture to that is that when you build a successful technology, all you're doing is taking an innovative group of people, that company, who deeply understand this particular thing that happens to this big community of people, or maybe say to all of us, right? It's a human to human thing.
Yes.
Where you build a technology that pops into that. So something you just said earlier about the founder who's really successful, he kept pivoting because it was never about the idea. It's never about the solution.
Right.
It isn't. It doesn't matter.
That's you're exactly right, and that's what I keep telling people. You start with an idea and engage with customer, and if you need to pivot, you pivot. Because the customer is going to tell you what they need.
Yep, exactly. And I think for very successful technology companies, I mean, when you think about a company like, say, Google or Apple or these these super huge tech giants, is it really because they built a phone, or is it because they've built technology that speaks to the human mind and emotions in such a specific way, and they've built that relationship with their community of customers, and they understand, they know what you're thinking before you know what you're thinking.
Yes.
It's kind of scary.
I definitely want to help people understand, and so to me, the some of the best founders are not technical founders, because these founders are people who actually know what the problem is, and then they may get a CTO type co-founder to kind of help with the technology to enable that solution. And so people, they always think this space is just for techies, and I've seen person after person, even the guy that invented this hopping platform or came up with this, he wasn't technical. But he knew he wanted to emulate an actual event.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great, this platform is a great story. Hopin is a great story. Definitely look it up if y'all are thinking about it, because that is somebody who understood, like, I know people, okay, we're in this virtual space. I know people need to connect in this way. They still have to network. Now I've built out a map of behaviors. I've built out a map of feelings. I've built out a map of what it means to be connected and feel informed and whatever. And then I just build the technology behind it. So yes, and absolutely. If you talk to an engineer or a good CTO, they're gonna tell you, like, you tell me the map, I will build the tech, but don't make me build that. That's not what I do. And so you have to find that complement of that engineer with the person who truly understands the human piece.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And so you talk about the community part of all this ecosystem stuff. And so me, like I've been about connecting with people, networking, and so the question you have to ask yourself is, why is that so important? And so in the nature of when a startup is innovating, it's that innovation comes from two people talking to each other or three people talking, and they get ideas, to actually innovate ways to solve the problem. So that's what networking really is. And so at this event, we start off with networking. And the reason why you do networking, because when two people talk, ideas flow.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
how you get growth. And so that literally is the secret to success is connecting with people. And once somebody understands what you're trying to do, it's almost hard for that other person not to, if they know something, not to suggest something based on what you've told them. And then even if they don't know it, then 2 months later, if they come across that's what you're looking for, they call you back and share it.
That's right. It is definitely a collaboration of imagination.
It's literally phenomenal when people connect, but a lot of people don't like the idea of talking to people one on one. But
Sure.
it's truly how you how you move forward, and be creative and and move forward. It's a little tough trying to do it by yourself.
It is. We are social creatures. So to honestly, Lloyd, like I did not study computer engineering. And my brother is a computer engineer. He knows about all that stuff, and he'll try to tell me about some of the technology he's building, and I'll follow him until about 50. So that's not how I got into this space. I got into this space because I had the opportunity and also sort of the life experience of having
Yes.
lived in 2 countries and having really been moved a lot, and just being in a space where I had to navigate in so many different circles, that it allowed me to bring to my professional life this idea of building bridges and connecting communities, and building those conversations that expand those communities. And that's what I brought to the tech startup space. So just what you just talked about, is what I'm here to offer, is really just like the human element. And you're absolutely right. Like that's that piece of sharing, and bringing your piece. Your piece might be really cool on its own, but once put together with someone else's, now you've got a whole other thing.
Yes, yes, it's really exciting and so it's this process of this continuous innovation where you when you have an idea, it's worth zero, but as you continuously innovate and with your co-founders and you engage with the customer, you add value to that idea, and so that's how you start with zero with that idea, and you get to the point where you are an investable entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those investors are investing in you because you have something unique to give to a big community of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also something that is right at the heart of something that people really want or need. So, and that's really all in the emotional system. Let's face it, like that's most of what we're buying.
Yes,
It's because we have some big feelings about it.
yes, that's exactly right. So, like, I think as we get close to the end, and I'm keeping my eye to see if the audience have any questions, and so
Yes,
definitely if you all have any questions, go ahead and type them in, and so we can get those questions answered. But I think Blanca, so there are a lot of people here in Northwest Florida that may have ideas, but they don't have a clue, what to do and where to get started. But I think, how would you communicate to them about, what you've seen with all these programs you've been involved in and all these opportunities you come across? Well, is there really an opportunity for them?
yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the advantages, and I think for many of us who are in the innovation space, being in a virtual world is not anything new,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's something universal.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been terrible tragedies as a result of this pandemic. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that it has done is it has forced us as a global community to go virtual. And so, whereas before I would say there was more steps, I would say now you have the opportunity. Like you said, Lloyd, like you're in Florida, Goody Nation might be based in Atlanta, but it's a virtual program. It's your community too.
Yes.
And there's people there from Detroit and DC and Sacramento, and
Yeah.
right. So it's like
Yeah.
they're all bringing. It's like all of a sudden you are not alone. So definitely encourage people to think about what are virtual opportunities to just share ideas. But yeah, I mean, if 5 years ago, especially for innovative companies or people who are interested in startups, I mean, it was very hard to find something unless you were part of some Stanford community or you lived in New York or something like that. Even then, I have plenty of New York and Northeast founders that will tell you how hard it is for them as Black founders, as women founders. So the reality is that yes, like it's just a question of seeking it out. And the other thing that I would say is I mentioned this before is, find your community. There are so many really cool programs out there. And again, are often virtual, where people are sharing ideas. So it's as simple as joining a Facebook group or finding something where people are just sharing these ideas and start getting those juices flowing and start making those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
and it'll go from there. But a lot of that is also believing that you have something really important and valuable to give to the world, which I will tell you, I believe you do. But it's sometimes you have to be the one to believe it in order to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right, and yeah, so and it's challenging for me a lot of times when I see people out there that you try to get them to understand that this ecosystem is available, and they have the perfect type business that to get into the ecosystem and take advantage and get all the free mentoring and learn how to pitch what they're doing and get all the funding they need to market to get all the new customers. And it's disappointing when you see the people that don't want it, they don't realize it, they don't take a look, and they miss so many opportunities. There's still plenty more in the future, but man, like this ecosystem is here to help. Why wouldn't you pay attention to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, and so one of the things that we do on a quarterly basis, Blanca, we have a small pitch competition, and we're just looking for people with ideas, and we want them to kind of say what the idea is in 250 words, and that's all it literally takes to enter the pitch competition, and so and have an opportunity to do so. Our competition this second one, and we're giving away $2,000, plus some other prizes and services. But the deadline is next Friday, April 30th, and we're going to actually select 10 finalists and a couple alternates, and we're going to let them pitch on May 13th. But we want to connect with you out there if you have ideas and to help you move forward. But this small $2,000, we just want to make you aware of this stuff, and we're going to connect you with programs that $100,000 programs, $250,000 programs, that you can get ready to be competitive in.
Well, I will tell you a story. So when I was Digital Undivided, I was just talking to a founder. I met her at Digital Undivided. She came to the pitch to be part of the incubator. She did not get in, right?
Okay.
She did not get in. And so, you think, hey, it's over. Well, no, it's not over. Because first, she with a big group of people and connected with a bunch of other people who are really interested in innovation. So made some friendships. And she kept applying for different programs. A year later, She got into a different program. And I just talked to her now. She's starting her second startup.
Wow.
So it's just a question, like sometimes when you look at opportunities like this, you think, I don't know if I'm ready, or I don't know if I'm the one who's going to get that $1,000. If you have a great idea and you really are excited and interested, and I've heard this so many times, so that's why I'm going to say it, there's something more that you can do in this world. Then just go ahead and do it, because you never lose it. Even if you didn't get the funding, you have built a new relationship. You've made yourself known in a new community. And that's just one more step closer to that more expansive self. So just do it.
Yeah, that's right. We had one founder. They applied to pitch in a pitch competition, but it wasn't any prizes associated with it. It was just their pitching to investors, and it was just for Black founders. And as a result of that, they actually got letters for like $100,000 to sponsor them into a program. As if you work and build your startup the right way, you can get in these programs, and there are just tons of these things out there, and we shouldn't waste these opportunities with all this money that's already set aside for Black and brown founders.
Yeah, you're right. You never know who's listening. You never know who's in the audience.
Right. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please, Lloyd.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a result of that one application, they got their name in the database, and now they're getting offered all these other opportunities. Right.
That's what happens. And you know what? I can tell you right now, you wouldn't recognize me 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you think that you have more to give, that you have more space to take, that you have something to create, don't waste that. You know, just
Yes.
give yourself the opportunity to take that with just one step, just the one step. Don't worry about the 20th step. Worry about the first. Joey always says this, just worry about what the step in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, just one last thing before we cut off here. One of the Hispanic, one of the newspaper guys, and they have a little um, Facebook group, and he definitely wants to connect with you, David Triana. So you know, make
I
sure.
love that.
Okay, all righty.
Yes,
All righty. So so we want to thank you so much, and I'm so happy we were able to connect with you, and so you can share some of your experiences and just provide your wisdom. And so we want to thank you very much, and we look forward to big and better things in the future.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
All righty. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week. Get those pitch competition applications in. Take care.
Right on.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Mhm.